Welcome to the International Football Roundup. Here we go. We're starting with the Azzurri. And as the cliche goes, it truly is a game of two halves. Let's talk about Germany 3, Italy 3. I'm going to be honest with you, listener. I turned over at halftime. I thought, fuck this. This game's finished. I'm going to go and watch Ireland and torture myself a little bit more. But we're going to go to Andrea, really. Let's talk about the first half. Was about as shambolic a performance I can remember. Before we get into the tactics and the level of ability, what really annoyed me was the fact that, to me, it felt like the Italian players spent more time shouting and arguing with the referee and trying to win free kicks or win decisions rather than actually trying to play the game. So every time there was a contentious foul or they were just moaning and shouting, and this kind of was summed up by the second goal, right? Do you feel like within that first half, that kind of points towards the attitude in general that the team went out with?
I guess you can say that, but I guess they're feeling the pressure of not performing to the level that they should be, and I think that's reflecting on the manager and the players themselves. I think the main issue is kind of stylistically. I feel like the press from Germany was just constant, and then I feel like my question was, why aren't Italy doing the same? Are they being told not to do it, which is astonishing? But then there's also times where they try to play from the back, and every time, and sometimes you just need to go long or down the line, and they got caught out quite a few times. So I think maybe perhaps they're playing kind of stylistic stuff that Spalletti's asking that's not really working well, and maybe the players are getting frustrated with that kind of style of play because it just seems to be the rhythm just seems to be really off in that match.
Yeah, I feel like the passing out from the back is kind of interesting because you've got Donnarumma is a great goalkeeper, right? But with his feet, he is not reliable. He's not good with his feet. But then you think, okay, do you keep it short because he's not good with his feet and short passing's easier? Or do you just decide to pump it long because at least the danger's away, but then they're less accurate when it's long passes? So it's really a conundrum that needs fixing. And then I think a defender like Gatti, he has a lot of limitations in general, I think. Obviously, I don't think he's playing if Calafiori doesn't injure himself in the first leg, but him also passing out from the back. There's so many passes that just went straight into the German press and straight into their midfield. I do have to say, Germany are a massively improving team. They are very good. You can see Nagelsmann is really getting the ideas across and they're looking like real contenders. But, Adam, it did feel like Italy just weren't able to get that passing game anywhere near the level to even slightly control the game for 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that we all called out in our kind of chat, was the distances between kind of the defence, the midfields, the forward line. It was shambolic. It was truly dreadful from an Italian point of view. And, I don't know if Germany actually did as well as we probably give them credit for, because it was made easy for them. It really was made easy by an Italian point of view. I felt like when we were kind of reflecting at half time, there was a lack of tenacity from that midfield, but it was just purely not doing the basics, Rory. It really was as dead simple as that. And, post-match, we heard from Jamal Musiala talking to the German press about the corner routine goal, for example. And the warning signs was there from the first leg, right? Where both of the goals were contributed from kind of that corner position, right? And Joshua Kimmich in particular was a kind of focal point for that. And without so many words, Musiala alluded to the fact that they knew that was a weakness. And this goes beyond just Donnarumma. This is about commanding your area and being able to be disciplined. We saw none of that across both legs. And that is ultimately the reason why Italy found themselves in the position they were in that second leg, in particular after that first half, was there was a lack of discipline. And the only player that can kind of say he tried or at least offered a bit of quality was Moise Kean. The rest of it, with the exception of Raspadori, for example. But look, from a point of view of playing stylistically, I feel like you're lost with actually what Spalletti is trying to achieve here. I don't really know what he's achieved in that space of time. And it might sound harsh, but ultimately we've given the guy an opportunity. You come out of it at this point and you kind of wonder, do Italy actually qualify for the next World Cup? Because at the moment it just doesn't feel like it.
Well, I think we have to look at this game in two halves, right? Because I think the second half obviously was a very different thing. So I think even like Moise Kean in the first half was completely anonymous. But if you're a striker up top and the ball isn't getting anywhere near you, what are you supposed to do, right? But I think I wanted to focus just on the first half a little bit more before we go into because I think the midfield I found really interesting. Because when I looked at it and it was on the team sheet, I thought, I like that midfield, right? Tonali, Richie, and Barella. I like that. That looks like there's a lot of quality. There's people that are like players that are able to control the ball, maybe win the ball back. I think like Richie and a few opportunities made some really big, like running back tackles to try and knock it out for a throw in or whatever. But there was still something missing in that midfield. It was far too easy to go through. Like Andrea, the only thing I could think, because I was looking at the bench and I was like, there's not really anyone. Like, should Ravella have started? Should Ravella have started ahead of Richie? Would that have given the midfield a bit more steel and made it a bit harder to run through? Because I think maybe, or are Italy just missing that player in general? Like someone who, like, not to go too far back, but like Gattuso, who's just going to win tackles for 90 minutes.
Possibly, yeah, because I think the only thing with Ravella is because he had such a poor first game that it was sense for him to be dropped. So I think it unfortunately for his sake. However, I do think that it feels to be some sort of issue there in general because I feel like Barella and Tonali already are quite similar in terms of what they do in box to box. They just need someone in that middle to kind of do the hard graft and also let them have the roam in midfield because in the end, players like Tonali and Barella have to drop deeper to kind of fill those positions and stop the breaks, really. And again, that's not where we want them to. We want them to be further forward, especially Tonali, as we've seen at Newcastle, how great he is going forward. So I think that there's a key issue there. But then again, it's whether Spalletti's still trying to learn because this, again, for me, it's a formation he's never done in his career. And again, he's trying to find a balance there. And I think still, and what you alluded to at the beginning, that it just seems to see like he doesn't really know that lineup and what works best for this national side.
Because I know that international teams, it changes more, right? Players in form, players injured, whatever.
Yeah.
But it does feel like every Italy game, I have no idea who's going to play. I have no idea who's going to start up top, who's going to start at the back. No idea. And then again, my last point before we move on to the second half, there is no reason on earth why Maldini is starting in this game. I just cannot see any reason, and I think beyond, and it sounds like, I know it's super lazy to say, but beyond the fact that his surname's Maldini, there's no reason for him to be in the team. And I think all I could do that first off is be like, Orsolini's sat at home for this. Like, that's all I could think. I know he doesn't even play on the left, he doesn't, but Orsolini would do a better job just up top there. He's been in better form. Like, that's the only thought that was in my head the entire time. I was like, why is he on that pitch? Like, Adam, again, it's things like this that make it easy to kick Spalletti now and be like, what are you doing? Like, he's making a rod for his own back here, right?
100%. You couldn't have said it any better, really. I think we're all kind of scratching our heads around the inclusion, given the fact that he hasn't really played for Atalanta in this kind of second half of the season. And I don't know how he gets, picked beyond, the availability of players like Luca, for example, or Zaccagni, if you want to kind of be kind of that way inclined. I know Retegui would have been the ideal opportunity, but unfortunately he sustained a hip injury and therefore it ruled him out. I just don't see what Maldini would have offered, especially against this Germany side. I think he's a bit lost personally, because we haven't really, from an Italian point of view, found the ideal position for him. Like you say, Orsolini would have probably offered a little bit more kind of direction. But yeah, I am a bit baffled with that pick. But as to, Andrea's point, I think the formation doesn't help as well, because I think certain players are used to playing that kind of style of football, but others aren't. And it just feels like when you get called up to the national squad, there isn't necessarily a identity of the way they want to play. And Spalletti hasn't found that out. And I think after so many games, and it's not necessarily against spectacular sides either, that this is the worry for Italian fans right now, is that you can say, against teams like Germany, you get found out, but against teams like Macedonia, where you're struggling to get a 1-0 victory, for example, it's not good enough, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I find it really, because he does have a, now obviously in the second half, and we'll go into the second half, he kind of brings on Raspadori, who has been playing lots of minutes, has been in pretty good form for Napoli. Why didn't he start the game? But even like, if you're looking at like, you think Germany are going to press super high, they're going to be harassing you, you're not going to have a minute on the ball. maybe using a striker like Luca, who has the physical presence, at least is someone who can hold the ball up, can just win a foul, whatever it is. I think I like how Moise Kean gets involved. He drops deep, he wins, he tries to hold the ball, but he's not quite got that big physical presence. I don't think that's the main part of his game. So I think even then, like, Kane and Maldini are too similar a type of player, maybe, and maybe you could have had another option there to play alongside Kane. But Andrea, in the second half, he does kind of change things. He brings on Fratesi, the lost man of Inter. He brings on Politano because why not? And then later on, he brings on Raspadori, and there's a big turnaround from Italy. We have to credit them for fighting back, or was it Germany being too complacent?
I think a bit of both, because I think Germany were way too complacent. I think we all thought it was done. I was already preparing for Spalletti to be sacked. I was like, it's done. I was fuming. It's probably the worst half I've ever seen. And you just couldn't see any comeback because, like we've all said, there was no rhythm. Everything was off. Like, there was no positive. And you just thought it was going to be 6 rather than a comeback.
Yeah.
But to be fair, again, changing the players... But it's interesting when you add actual players that have shown qualities in the past, what they can do, rather than Maldini, who I think has scored 6 goals in 5 years.
Yeah.
So again, that's where you're like, maybe there's a bit of smartness in picking players that actually can do a job. But again, I think what you started to see more is they're actually, running at the players, actually trying to do something. It's like, again, very basic, but it's amazing what you can achieve if you actually run at your defender. Or you press them, because let's not forget as well. I've got to be honest. That Germany 11 is not their best 11. It felt like their reserves. Really, that's how. Like, if you think about it, in quite a lot of positions, a lot of them is like that's not going to be their 11 in the World Cup, for example. And you're just thinking that they're easy. They could be got at, and we're just letting them get to us. But yeah, the performance in second half was a lot better. But again, I still put it on the fact that they just thought the game was done more rather than us playing well. But I think over time, seeing like players like Moise Kean and stuff in this national team, maybe we can start to see more of a difference. I like the fact, for example, Keane's that clinical nature he's kind of brought it to the national team, which is good to see, because they were 2 hard chances and he took them really well. I've got to say, but again, I think. It kind of lacks that leadership in this team as well. I think you look at Bastoni, for example, who was playing with Chiellini, who was playing Bonucci. You'd think he'd be the natural guy that kind of, but he hasn't really lived up to that expectation. Then you've got players like Barella, Tonali. Yes, they're good, but they can also go missing in these type of games. And I think that's the key. I don't think they've had anyone that takes it by the scruff of the neck and be like, we can win this, we can do this. Although it looks like we did because we came back to 3-3. We don't have that in us. There seems to be something missing. But again, I just think for me, the main kind of issue, what I'm worried about, not just only Spalletti's style of play, I'm kind of worried that he's kind of falling into that Mancini trap. Coming to the end of Mancini's reign was where he was picking the same players that were not working, but he kept sticking at it, thinking it will work, and it missed us the World Cup. And I think Spalletti's doing the same. Maldini's been in that squad the last 3 times. Certain players that shouldn't be there are in there. And then you've got good players like Orsolini, like we've said, Sorteo. Unbelievable Sorteo would have been perfect that match because we had no one. Stuff like that. So it's that regret of not changing it up. And if he's persisting with this similar type of players, I worry he's falling into that Mancini trap, and that's what cost Mancini another qualification in his job. So that I don't know what you guys think, but I just think that's where I start to worry more, that he's kind of falling into that trap, rather than trying to be a bit more open with his selection.
Yeah, well, the last 3 games have been like France, Germany, and Italy have lost 2 and gone 3-0 down in one of them. Like, it's obviously not a good omen in big games, right? It's clearly like he's not able to prepare for these big games, or he's not able to like set up a team to deal with these big teams. I think obviously the word here is everyone is absolutely like fuming with him and quite happy if he left. I think the fact that Mancini hasn't been appointed at Juve is maybe interesting. But I think that they're clearly looking around. Allegri has been linked to it as well. From what I've seen, a lot of Italy fans would be quite happy to take Allegri. I think all of those stereotypes that Italian football's been fighting for 20 years would be proven exactly right if Allegri took over. But I think what you could guarantee is probably results and that you would qualify for a tournament. Because I think it's kind of gone from like a blip, Italy not getting to tournaments, to like not quite a trend, but a habit. And like, especially if they miss another World Cup, like that is beyond embarrassing. Like, because it would be 3 World Cup or 2 World Cups. No, 3 World Cups, right?
Yeah, 3 and 2 Euros before that.
Just absolutely unbelievable. So there is nothing like. But Adam, I don't know about you. Does it feel like the FIGC is stuck between a rock and a hard place now? Because it's like, okay, well, it's such a monumental decision that we have to make now. Like, do we stick with this guy or do we just get someone else and it's the same result? Like, how do you see them falling on this? I think they're going to stick with Spalletti, honestly, and I think they're going to stick with him. But
I think they're going to ride it out, given how easy the group is for the qualifiers, bar Norway in that qualifying group. I think that is the potential test for Italy, and it'll be interesting because that is their first game is against Norway. And then, ironically, it's the last game of the qualifying round. So I think, given the opposition in that group, if they suddenly came unstuck, and let's say, hypothetically, they drew a few, then I think there'll be a few sweaty people in that FIGC offices wondering whether they should stick with Spalletti. But I think I'm with you. I feel they will stick it out unless there is a candidate that is ready to kind of jump in. And I think the only kind of candidate that might make them kind of rethink it is if someone like a Carlo Ancelotti was ready to kind of jump in and take it. I'm not convinced Mancini, and Allegri would be candidates that they would look at. Likewise, Maurizio Sarri is available as well. Again, I can't see it happening. And Gasperini has always been linked as well. I know he divides opinions as well. I just think with the caliber of coaches that are available, I just can't see them doing it. But I think it will be dependent on these results going into the qualifying rounds for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone good enough out there to risk it. I think like you have to stick with what you've got because there isn't that, like Adam said, there isn't that clear candidate of like, okay, get them now and then we're definitely gonna qualify. Just to clear it up, their group is Italy, obviously Norway, Israel, Estonia, and Moldova. Well, fingers crossed Israel get kicked out at some point. But if they don't, they could prove a fairly tricky opponent, I think. Like, they're not as bad as people think they are on the football pitch. But I think that, that could be a bit of a tricky one where there could be a bit of a banana skin. And obviously Norway are one of the great kind of puzzles of international football because they've got a very, very good squad, but they still haven't qualified. So yeah, a tricky one there. Like, Andrea, how do you see it? What would you do from this point? Would you want to see, like, sod it, let's just get Allegri in and 1-0 our way to this World Cup?
I personally think there should be a change, but I just know it won't happen, so I don't think there's any point dwelling on it. But what I would say is that I kind of worry. I've just looked at the Norway result now as well. They've already won both their games. They beat Israel away 4-2. They can put teams aside. If it goes down to goal difference, they could finish top. So because Italy don't score goals. So I just think I worry, and it's ridiculous. Honestly, growing up, it was never if we're going to qualify. It was always how many we're going to score and who was playing. The debuts. That's what it was. Now it's ridiculous how I'm feeling like this. I'm panicking that Norway's in the group. It's ridiculous. No, but I think the only thing that I can say, I think I was saying it before, but my main point would be he really needs to be open in his selections and getting new players in, because if he sticks with this kind of squad he's picking, we're going nowhere. We're going sideways, and I think that's what I worry. And again, the World Cup's next year. It's not 2 years. It's next year. It's not far. And we're nowhere near ready. We haven't got anything ready at all. But again, I think that the FIGC, to be honest, they're tight. They're not going to sack him. They're not going to afford it. It's all this rubbish. And I think again, it's such a risky choice to stick with him. I feel like it'd be less risk to sack him because at least it'll be like maybe a new bounce, someone with a different idea, different players they can bring in, a bit more excitement. I think that's the other thing. We've kind of we're so low. and it started from that Switzerland result in the Euros, and it still continued. And I said this back then. I was like, it's so hard to come back from such a low. And so
that whole Euros performance was really depressing, depressing.
Yeah, so any drop will remind you of that and all the lows. So it's so hard for him to come out of, and I think it's just, and I feel bad because like you look at someone like Maldini who doesn't deserve to be there, but you just look at him, you're like, why are you there? And you get negative thoughts watching it, and
it's not his fault though either. If you know what I mean, it's not his fault. Yeah.
And in the end, I tried to be neutral, and I was like, to be fair, he tried to run with it. He kept getting lost the ball, but at least he tried something. But we shouldn't be debating that at this level. At this level, it should be concrete players who are world class that are doing the business.
And is it worth, like, Spalletti just... I know that the majority of Serie A teams now, or a lot of Serie A teams are playing 3-5-2, and this is what he's trying to do. Like, these players are used to it. But is it worth Spalletti just going, no, you know what? I know how to coach this system. You need to learn this system. This is like, you know, the 4-3-3 he played at Napoli or whatever. Like, this is what I know how to do. Like, does he need to just implement that now? Like, Andrea, I'm going to ask you, like, because I feel like at this point, just go to what you know. And you, like, because at least... then you can die on your own sword, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. But again, if he does that, then it doesn't make sense why people like Orsolini don't get picked, because he'd be perfect in the Spalletti system. It's a bit all over the place. But again, I think we've just got to stick with players that can do the job, but also the ones that who are on form right now. A mixture of both. And obviously in England we'll come to it, but you've seen that in their squad. It's like a bit of both. Experience, but also ones that are new who are on form. And I think we're not doing either, and that's where it's like lacking. But yeah, I do agree. I think he should just go back to it, because at the end of the day, you don't know this formation well, and again, it's running a fine risk, and that's what makes you even question. Like, if you're going to stick with this, then surely we get someone that knows this formation inside out. Like a Conte would be perfect right now. If we're going to play this formation, get him in, done, and you know you're going to be in safe hands. You know, so I think that's what's worrying.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of Conte in Italy dugout AI generated images. I'll be honest, there's a lot of people typing that into Grok at the moment, I think. But yeah, Adam, so not looking great for Italy, but you think they should are we going to have egg on our face again? But they should really qualify, right?
Yeah, I think with the greatest respect to Norway, I think Italy should have enough quality. But that said, I don't think it will be straightforward. I don't think it will be straightforward. I think they will probably squeak themselves through this qualification round. The key question, though, however, is how does Spalletti get them set up for the World Cup if they do make it? I think generally to that point that Andrea made is you can see they're not really comfortable, and they're not really comfortable with what they're doing. But to my earlier point, there is a lack of leaders within this group. There isn't anyone. I was just looking at the group of players. None of them strike me as captains for their natural club sides, you know, with maybe the exception of Barella, for example. Maybe Di Lorenzo is the exception here and there.
I would say Di Lorenzo, to be honest. Yeah.
Maybe Gatti at a push as well. The rest, I just don't necessarily
even have
see
him in the squad. But
well, that's a separate conversation, isn't it? But when we're looking at it, honestly, none of them strikers leadership style, or you know, ones that might evoke some kind of emotion out of this group of players. Whereas if we look at, say, Italy sides of the past, there was always a general within each area of the pitch, right? There was always that kind of sense of pride. They would evoke that kind of feeling when it came to the national team. That's the worry for me, is that when you look at national sides as well in general, there is one or two characters here I just feel there's a lack, and I think that's the worrying thing. So Spalletti needs to think or work out a kind of rhythm, a style of play, something that will get at least the fans behind this group of players, because I think that's what needs to happen, is that, you know, I feel the fan base feeds off what they see on the pitch. If they can't see it happening on the pitch, what you get is what we're seeing right now, which is vitriolic kind of chanting for his kind of sake rather than the players. So, yeah, worrying times for Italy.
And please, no more games in the San Siro. Just don't play in the San Siro ever again. Just don't. Just
Olimpico, please.
Go to the rest of Italy. Honestly, there's some lovely stadiums out there. Do not go to San Siro. It's just not worth it. But we're going to leave Italy there. I think we're done with the autopsy of the Azzurri.